Hello, Dr. Jen Harvey.
Hello, Reverend Dr. Jacqui Lewis. I'm
How
so happy to be with you.
too? How are you? How you doing?
I am good. I'm tired. I am
Mhm.
in touch with the achy grief of this world.
Yeah.
I'm grateful for public, prophetic, healing ministers like yourself in this achy world. I feel so in touch with that. How are you?
Almost exactly. I really didn't sleep last night. I'm looking at myself going, I can tell. Um, I fell asleep early, just fell asleep early, kind of after a long day, and then I woke up at about 1 o'clock in the morning. Today's my mother's birthday. She died about 7 years ago. So that she was she was hanging around.
Yeah.
But mostly, I just can't believe the world we're living in, to be
Yeah.
honest, and the roots of so much of the violence and vitriol and territorialism is, identity politics, race and ethnicity, and the
Yeah.
stuff that we're going to talk about. So I'm delighted that you are doing what you do in the world. I like the white people who are talking to the white people about race.
Thank you.
I love it. It's so important, Jen. I mean it. It's so important. I recommend your books all the time, and I'm just really proud of the work you're doing.
Well, I really appreciate you naming that. And I want to name that that work. I'm constantly asking myself, and I have questions for you
Mm-hmm.
about how those of us that are seeking to do that work faithfully continue to make sure we're doing so in ways that are accountable and are supporting, amplifying, connecting with the kind of the work that you and other people of color, women of color in particular, are doing
Right.
around all of this. And so I have questions for you about that, especially as I sit here in the academic space while also doing activisty things, but also then just wanting to sort of, continue to grow deep connectedness
Yeah.
around what public ministry looks like. That you are just, you are really on the front lines. Every time I open Instagram, I think, okay, what's happening behind the scenes for Dr. Lewis?
Lots.
Because I
Yeah.
know some of
Yeah.
what comes when you are leading in the way that you're leading.
Yeah.
In some ways, not just from the kind of challenges on the kind of white supremacy and hatred of queer people and a willingness to leave the poor behind, but also those kind of forces. But I also have a lot of questions about. I feel like it's a really hard space right now for being willing to lead into kind of messages of unity and connection. So sometimes it's hard on the left too.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of questions for you about that, about the work you're doing in that space and how you navigate that.
Well, I am so Jen. I'm always thinking I wish I had more time to connect with you and people like you. So let's make a promise that this conversation will be the beginning of more connections, because I do think we have things to teach each other, to amplify each other. Do you ever hear me say playfully that I'm on the nice white people tour? Like
I don't know if
am.
I've heard that, but say more about it.
I am on the nice white people tour, honey, all the time. Like that, I don't exactly know when it started, but it might have started when I was a corporate person working for Eastman Kodak Company
Okay.
in DEI, which would have been EEO back in the olden days when I was a young person, working at Kodak in the 1990s. I just learned early. My dad was in the Air Force, and we were only Black kids on a base, for some time.
Okay.
And I learned early how to, I could call it code switch, but I don't really mean that. That might be the closest way many people relate to it.
Mm-hmm.
But I learned to be, let's say I learned to be multivocal. That's what I learned, how to be multivocal. I like that word. Right? Yeah. So Barbara Christian wrote this beautiful article called Speaking in Tongues. She's a Black womanist writer. So the Black women always learn how to speak in tongues.
I know that piece.
Right? You know that? Isn't that great for you?
Yes.
And it's true. Like you are a little Black person unless you're living in but even then you're speaking in tongues generationally. You're speaking in tongues to your cousins in Mississippi versus your cousins in New York regionally.
Right.
So I learned early to say hard things in ways that are both fiery and challenging and get it together. But also I learned how to say invitationally, we're not going to make an anti-racist America without you. So people have heard me say that, and I get invited to go to Kentucky and Texas,
Yeah.
and, Alabama and Chicago, lots of places where predominantly white audiences want to be coached about anti-racist work,
Yeah.
and maybe feel they can ask the questions they think are awkward or not as smart or something, and have a Black woman who Ruby sells own that you're an elder now, a Black elder. I'm like, what day did that happen? But
Thank
to
you
have
for being that.
no, I don't know. I mean, I'm like, I don't know if I'm ready for that, but
Okay.
she said so. So
Okay.
she's Mama Ruby. But Jen, like to have a Black person affirm they're trying.
Right.
Do you bump into white people who just they want to learn, but they also can't bear to be the one who's not learning or something? You know what I mean?
Oh, I mean, I think you're describing dynamics that I see and experience, and have experienced myself, that affect. So here's what I hear when you name that. As a teacher who spends lots of time in sort of the formal classroom,
right?
A mentor one time said to me, the spiritual asceticism of teaching is that you agree to teach the students you actually have and not the students you wish you had. And that has served me very well, not only around issues of race, sometimes even issues of sometimes in my teaching career, it's been challenging for me to teach white students at a certain point in my journey, even though I know it's also my call. But I also know that spiritualist discipline, or practice of asceticism is how I think about it in teaching. When I think about sort of ministry and activist spaces, I know that that's both a choice that someone like you can make or not make, and I imagine that it costs something. I mean, the people of color in my life, and it's typically in my life been Black women who have either responded to a call or chosen to be willing to engage the to use your words, the nice white folks.
The nice white folks.
I don't know about that word, but but I perceive that as both an incredible gift to the world, and I also know that I know that it comes with a cost, though I'm not speaking about your life specifically. And I'm curious about how you think about in predominantly white spaces where we're those of us seeking to work with other white folks who are ourselves white, if and how there's this tension for me around that, where I do think we need to meet white folks where they are. And I also know that that's not everybody's call when it comes to communities of color, people of color.
Yeah.
Grateful for the folks who do it. And I don't assume that it's a call that is owed to white folks, right? Even though I also know without folks like you, I wouldn't be who I am today if many Black women hadn't invested in me and held me accountable with love and anger, but continued to be in relationship with me even after I made mistakes, messed things up, didn't say racist things because I hadn't been mentored by my elders, right? So but it creates a tension for me because I've seen the cost also for people in my life who have walked that path.
I want to ask you about those people in just a sec. I want to say a little bit more about my playful white people, nice white people tour.
Do it.
Jen, there's not all the white people aren't studying race and teaching race and thinking about race and trying to make an anti-racist world. Like they're not. They're not. So you're on a certain trajectory that you got on. I'm going to ask you to tell me about that, like the relationships that got you on that trajectory, the experiences that got you on the trajectory. You tell me yours, I'll tell you mine.
Okay.
But some of us have to be on that bridge. Some of the people that are on the bridge are up, they're walking 3/4 of the way across the bridge already, right? They've learned, they've thought, they've asked themselves questions, they've made mistakes, they've built relationships outside of their primary ethnic, identity. They actually have friends that are brown or Black or white or whatever that is, and they are constant students, and that's a certain place on the bridge. And somebody else is just saying, I know I'm been raised in a racist world, and that to Peggy the knapsack to some practitioners that just because I'm white on the planet, I'm a racist. Whew, that's hard. People are there and they're asking themselves, how can they not be racist? So everybody's on this arc bending toward justice. Let's make it an arc. The playful, nice white people messaging is the people who know that they don't know and want to know and invite me to come and talk. I was in Kentucky a few weeks ago. Like there was like 2 Black people in the room, and I was one of them. And at one point, maybe 4, but they paid for me to come to Kentucky, to Georgetown, to a small college, to bring middle experience and Jacqui wisdom, insight to white people.
Yeah,
I think that's
capital W wisdom. I would say
right,
sure.
but I think that's a thing to notice.
Yes.
It's not always enough, but it's really an impressive sometimes starting place, because I'm not standing in front of white people like saying you are doing an amazing job necessarily, right?
Right.
I'm saying I'm calling folks in, like this is what it is. So I'm wanting whoever hears this, whenever they hear it, and they buy your Raising White Kids book, and they buy this book, and they follow you in the world and follow me in the world, whoever hears this 10 weeks from now, if you are white and you're curious, I'm so excited for that. If you're white and you know this world runs on white supremacy gasoline everywhere all the time, if you know race always matters, I'm proud of that. If you don't know that, if you don't know that whiteness is the sauce, but you still listened, that's cool. Because we're actually not going to fix this racist white supremacist nation if white people don't give it the program. Absolutely. We're just not going to fix it. Nope. What do you think about that?
I think so. Part of what I try and do in this book that's about to come out is talk about, and it's a book really aimed for white folks, talk about how we transform white communities.
Yes.
Because what you just said, if we don't get more white folks wherever we're beginning on that bridge or that arc to move, right, it just just the sheer numbers of it, right?
Right.
But the thing that I want to say about what that image you gave of the bridge, one of the things, and that I would want folks to hear who are listening, is that one of the things that you described was, folks who are sort of at a certain point on the bridge or the arc, and they're in relationship with people who are outside of their own dominant identity and have, sort of recognized something different is possible. And I would say thank God and thank the many people of color in my life who've walked with me that's about where I typically hover. I get asked all the time, sometimes by white folks, sometimes by people of color, like, what's in it for white folks? Why would you do any of this? Like, make that case. And because of where that sort of arc image, I can't even make sense of the question, because the joy, the liberation, the connection, the beauty, the richness, the wholeness that comes into your life when you recognize the sauce of whiteness is actually poison. There's poison in it. It's toxic. Yep. And once you actually get to a certain point where you've experienced something different, you never ask the question, like, why would I do this? Yeah, is it a walk that's challenge? Yeah, because white supremacy is challenging for all of us in different ways, different costs, not making a parallel, but you don't go back once you get to a certain point, because you're like, why would I want to eat that sauce? It's toxic to me. And that's one of the things I want folks to hear, is that when public intellectuals and public ministers like yourself and the other folks who have poured into a willingness to show up in spaces where folks are seeking to grow and change and transform, the gift of that is the invitation to take a further step along an arc that at a certain point you don't go back. And not only do you not go back, you also then start worrying about and saying, oh my gosh, and I want to get my people out of this too. Right. Which is, I think, where I'm always thinking about the folks in my life where I'm like, if they only knew, if they would only come with me, a different experience is possible. Yeah. And we could change the world.
We can. I love that, Jen. And I think it makes me want to stick with, I had the moral arc in my mind, bending toward justice.
Yes.
But if we stay with that bridge metaphor for just a moment, I do think it's important. Hope, fast forward to that word hope.
Yeah.
I hope, right? I hope I am in relationship with not nice white people, white people, but like with incredibly amazing white humans who have done all manners of work to rid themselves of white supremacist ideologies, to confess, to repent, to turn, to make the world better. Like all kinds of people who are, who have crossed over the bridge and have turned back around and are like, come on over here, and are ready to burn down the back of the bridge where the people are.
Burn it
Right.
down. That's why the nice has to go away. We got to be ready to
right.
burn some stuff.
That's right. And it really is true. It's sort of like nice as an entry point, right? Just, I'm curious is what I mean by that.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be stuck there, but to say we've got to get on this bridge together.
Yeah.
The people who are doing this work have to help more people get on the bridge, walk across the bridge, walk away from the vile, horrible, historic, life-choking, devastating power that is white supremacy.
Yeah.
That is white supremacy that gets inside folks like Clarence Thomas, that gets in folks like Benjamin Netanyahu, that gets in folks like Donald Trump, that gets in the folks, that gets in some Black folks, that gets in Indigenous and Asian and Hispanic and Black folks, because whiteness is everywhere. It's in the atmosphere. And we take on the competition and the capitalism and the BS of whiteness, the conversation style, right? The running of meeting style, the polity style, everything that is based on European oppressive techniques that linger.
Yep.
So
cohere with racism instead of creating conflict.
Exactly.
Be passive in the face of violence against queer people, marginalized people, for the sake of maintaining relationship with, yes, all of that.
The ways that the whiteness strips the white people. Maybe this work too. When I was working on I always playfully say my PhD is in race. Thank you. It's psych and religion at Drew, and we had this beautiful opportunity to build programs that we wanted. And I did this whole narrative identity thing, and this idea of the stories that shape gender, the stories that shape sexuality, right, and the stories that shape race, was my focus. I think about like white means never having to say you're ethnic. Jen, is this piece I read. Like white people lost their Polish, Greek, Ukrainian, Dutch, Scotch, Irish, potato cooking, latke making, like all the things that made the ethnic joy and character of people washed away.
The same system of white supremacy and colonial settler dispossession, genocide, combined with unregulated capitalism, those same forces is what caused that for those of us racialized as white, as for people from the continent of Africa, as First Nations people. It's the same structures, did different things, but we're all in those same structures.
That's right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have a question for you.
Yes. I'm turning away because my plug is unplugged. Okay. But I'm listening.
Plug it in. Okay.
Let's plug it. Yeah. What's going on? Come back, power. Okay, there it is.
Okay.
I'm here.
So I want to hear about how you got where you are on the bridge. Because part of how I got there was through a sort of the short version has like God So Loved the World from white evangelicalism.
Yeah.
Learning in college at a conservative Christian college.
Where'd you go to school?
I went to Westmont College.
Okay.
In Santa Barbara, conservative evangelical college.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
Started studying religion and theology, asking, and found in my classrooms, of course, we were talking about should women lead in the church, things like that.
Yeah.
But I started volunteering in a homeless ministry for the unhoused, and learning about economic injustice, and then realizing, okay, the same folks saying women shouldn't be ordained are driving Mercedes-Benz past unhoused people. That doesn't make sense. And quickly found my way to liberation theology, and had this, like, by my senior year, like, Black liberation theology, God is Black, Jesus is Black. But of course, I had no actual Black people in my life.
Can you say what year that is? Not to date yourself, but to just to give
I'm
a
happy
cultural.
to date myself. That was like early 90s.
Okay.
I graduated college in 93. So I read Cone, and I was like, I'm going to Union to study with Cone. And I went to Union in New York City and showed up as this white former evangelical who's had a conversion experience through books. And I walk into Union where, as you know, like, I was there when now Senator Warnock was a student, right?
Right.
Reverend Dr. Leslie Callahan was a student.
Yep.
And I start running around saying, God is Black.
How did they like that? How did they enjoy that? What was that like for you?
Let's say it this way. They liked to quickly explain to me why it was not okay that I was doing that. And thank God they did, because that was the early 90s. And they really said to me clearly, you need to figure out this part for you if you want to say that. And that's how I started getting in a serious way on the bridge, because that community of humans, it really held me with love and consistency, but clarity, anger, and accountability to a journey. And that's, I think that community gave me my call, and I will never be anything but think that they saved my life. Oh. So that's how I ended up on the bridge. And I want to know how you ended up on the bridge, because for me, it was like academy bridging ministry, because then I did ministry for some time, and in some ways I'm doing ministry still.
Yeah. But did you serve a church, Jen? You served a church.
I did. I served Madison Avenue Baptist Church, kind of by accident, and then ended up loving it and falling in love with that community, and was ordained in the early 2000s. By then I'd come out as a lesbian, and just sort of found my way back to the Baptist tradition, a different Baptist tradition, but Union gave me language and a journey back to the church. Yeah. And I also had this ongoing academic call around, really, I was just possessed with the question of, what does it mean to take whiteness seriously in the context of theology and ethics, and from a commitment of liberationist understandings of who God is, while taking social identity seriously, and all of the questions and chasms that opens, including, well, what kind of identity can I have if whiteness is a toxic, formation? What's out there? How do you not? How do you not appropriate other people's identities when you've lost? How do you rebuild? How do you talk about ethnicity without evading the reality of white supremacy and white privilege? All those kinds of questions that I'm still churning with. I'll be churning with for the rest of my life. But but I'm just so I really do want to know, like, how what the academic theological bridge to the public ministry, congregational ministry, but so much broader than that you do now. Like what were some of the key points for you in your PhD on race, and that got you on the bridge to the point where you stand on the bridge?
Thank you for that. But I can ask you a follow up before I do that, because I'm happy to do that. But can you talk, because I feel like, and push me back if this doesn't make sense. Okay. I think about you kind of coming out of the evangelical church, and coming into Union, and coming into these conversations, and you're coming out as a lesbian, right? This kind of coming out. And I kind of want to say coming into a fullness or something, coming in, right? Well, I just want so much to be able to, don't steal this if you all are listening. I'd love to write about coming in. I feel like I've come, when I tell you, I feel like I've come in too, right? I've come out and I've come in to something. So is there a parallel to your coming into this work, coming out of that space into this work, and also coming into yourself as a lesbian? Did those things happen in a way that were mutually affirming or liberating, or?
Oh, I love that question. And let me say why, because I actually don't know. But And I can't, so in my book, I reflect a lot, and I'm curious how this will be engaged by the folks that engage my writing.
Mm-hmm.
I talk about how coming out as anti-racist, seeking to be that when you're white,
Yep.
requires a kind of willingness to potentially lose all of your relationships.
Yeah.
I have lost family because of my unwillingness to be quiet, comply, just go about. I've lost family, and I'm not saying that so feel sorry for me there, but there are costs.
Right.
And one of the things I realized when I was writing the book is queer people do that all the time. Decide,
yes,
okay, is my identity, my commitments, who I want to be in the world, more compelling? So compelling, I'll do it even knowing I might lose my family.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's the coming in. I love that language. The coming in, that's the piece of, like, when we were talking earlier about the bridge, like for me, realizing experiencing different ways of being in the world is a kind of coming in that I would never give up now. And it's the same with queerness. In my own journey, I don't know if there was a parallel, because I actually came out as a lesbian rather late, my late 20s. By then I was well into the harder parts of coming out, seeking to come out as an anti-racist.
Yep.
But I do think the moral muscle that I was building as I came out as an anti-racist, the moral muscle to be willing to stand on the earth, even while family members, some painful things happened around that. A parent who told me, go live in Guatemala if you don't like it here so much. A parent, what does it mean when your parent says something like that to you? I think that enabled me to sort of internally have the fortitude to know, A, there's community on the other side.
Yep.
And B, I have the moral muscle to claim myself, and it's going to be worth it. So in that way, there may have been a kind of parallel. And I think sometimes queer people who are white come out as queer first and then connect to the anti-racism piece. For me, it was the opposite.
Yeah. Yep.
But
I hear that. That's super helpful. Yeah. And I think the not knowing makes sense too, though. Like the kind of how does one,
yeah.
I love that we were talking about the moral muscle, though, right? The authentic self moral muscle. This identity development piece of my work is the coming fully into who we are is our developmental project. To really claim all the parts, I'm not strong on internal family systems, but that idea of there's many, I'm more able to say many objects inside us, objects being the relationships or the experiences, and integrating those, being able to have a coherent, cohesive story about who we are, to accept the parts of our story that are funky and hard and shame baking, but also to keep building new stories.
Yes.
This is about getting to the world healing work, right, Jen?
That developmental piece around, and stories, and integrating and developing new ways of being a self. I think what you're talking about is so understood and underexplored in some of the sort of justice, anti-racist spaces that we're trying to grow right now. And it's so necessary, because there's this kind of ongoing, I feel like almost like a sense that if we just can get folks to check a certain list of, here's the exact right things you do all the right time, we'll have accomplished anti-racism and pro-LGBT inclusion. And the developmental piece you're describing, the growth of the self, we need that understanding and that theory and that way of engaging one another
100
in our movements. And they are not as fully embraced and engaged, I think, as we desperately need them to. That sort of bigger, we're all human beings navigating, right?
All human beings becoming, right? We're humans becoming.
Humans becoming.
Right.
Yes,
we're humans becoming.
Yeah.
And I have to say it loud to function in this country, Jen. Like, if I don't think that the stories that have shaped this crappy environment, this container in which we find ourselves, if we don't think that those stories can change, like, I don't need to go to work.
Right.
My job as a preacher, public theologian, writer is to help imagine, a better story, an Ubuntu story. My life is connected to your life. I am who I am because you are who you are. We're all inextricably connected, Dr. King would say. I can't be fully who I am until you're fully who you are. Honestly, Jen, if I don't believe that, I have zero hope then. If I don't think we can change the story, your work, your teaching with the students, with the writing, the way you use theory as a story, right? Theories are stories.
Theories are stories.
The way we put the theory in the world and say, what about this? And just imagine this. What if it's this? If we don't do that, we don't change. And I just don't go to work.
Yeah.
And I just move with John, I think, to Paris.
Yeah, okay.
Because I like the cheese and the wine. And it seems like you don't get fat when you're there, eating the cheese and the wine. So I'm just done. Just like go and have a life.
Yeah.
Like a little hedonism, just chill. But I do have hope. I know, right? I know my great grandmother was one generation from enslavement. I know that she raised a daughter and 13 boys, and the daughter, raised the boys. And I know that my mother, raised her kids in a racist nation in depression in Mississippi. She was born and raised, and it's better. It just is. It's not perfect. We're not finished, but it is better. People have changed the story.
Yeah.
In one family at a time, one relationship at a time.
Yeah.
They've marched, they've struggled. So how did I get on this bridge?
How'd you get on this bridge? And
Emma's
you
alive.
believe we can change. I want to just hear that word.
Yeah, no,
you believe we can
honestly,
change. That's the crux of it.
Absolutely. Like,
yes.
we have changed.
We have changed.
We have changed. Lord, I know I've been changed.
I've changed too.
Right?
Yes.
The angels in heaven did something. I've changed.
Yep.
And
we
have
to say that. I hear you saying we've got to say that. Publicly
claim
be willing to own that and claim it. Yes. Okay.
Because it happens.
Tell me about the bridge. How'd you get
Transformation
on the bridge?
happens, right?
Yes.
So my mother, Mommy, happy birthday, Mama. Mommy's really around today. Was born in 1937 in Louisville, Mississippi. My father was born in 1934 in Meridian, Mississippi. They were depression, poor kids whose fathers both left for different reasons, raised by these single moms in this crazy behind Jim Crow South. Horrible. And I know more about this now. My mother's and my father's faiths, right? Like you get the God your parents give you, without discrimination, without analysis, without a hermeneutic at all. Here's the God you get from your parents until you ask a question about it.
Yeah.
And the God my mother and father gave me was, hone in the soil, right? They had faith that God loved them and God was on the move. And there would going to be a change in circumstance because that's what God was about, period. Liberation, I don't think they ever said that word, but like there will be freedom. God is on the side of the oppressed. They didn't have cone.
Right.
They're like, this isn't what it is. And they weren't like, it's going to happen in heaven. It was, watch it happening now. Mommy sang in the choir with Fannie Lou Hamer. My Uncle George was a trustee at St. James Chapel where Fannie Lou got recruited by SNCC. I've learned these things since then.
Wow,
so my uncle was like walking up and down Louisville streets. I didn't know this, Jen, till a few years ago. But my uncle was walking up and down registering people to vote with Fannie Lou Hamer and getting shot at for being that guy. And my mother, I now know, was picking cotton with Fannie Lou Hamer and Pap and getting on a truck with her mother and going to plantations to pick cotton like a man, Mommy did at 4. So Mommy, who picked cotton when she was 4, like a man, raises children with my dad, Air Force folk, who there were no limits to what we could imagine or dream about because of their sacrifices. My 4-star general brother and my Grammy award-winning sister and my law review brother and my other brother that teaches children to be good and just rocks the world, and my little life of theology, like they did that. They did that with belief in transformation. And it makes me teary.
Yeah.
How did they do that? Because God is, I think. And because love is where I'm at really now. That they knew love was a force.
Wow.
So they poured it in us, like with broken stuff too, Let's be competitive and let's put our grades on the refrigerator. That was fun. But my niece and nephew are being raised by my brother, who was raised by my imperfect father. And he's the best father in the world, my brother is. So I just the generations have changed. And you look at the fusion movements then and now, you look at those young college kids going to Mississippi, Jen. Why did they do that? To be trained by leaders.
Yeah.
To get frustrated, to call Dr. King the Lord and be mad. But like
Right.
they did, the Black young people and the white young people, it was mostly Black and white conversations back then. They did the thing. They did it.
They believed in transformation too. They believed that change was possible too.
And therefore it happened.
Yes.
Like it is true that the story you tell yourself is the one you're going to do.
Yeah.
Can it be fixed? Hell yeah. Can we try it together? For sure. If we believe that we can change it, then we can change it, and we will change it. So I'm on the bridge because they were those people. They moved to the Air Force so they could be like away from the South craziness. I was a little Black chick on the white Air Force base called the N-word for the first time when I was in kindergarten. And I'll stop here. My mom and dad shaped me when in that moment. The white girl who called me the N-word shaped me. And I'm a nasty nigger who gets chocolate milk from her mother's tits. Like that was ugly. Yeah. My parents, my mother said, "Oh, Jack, it's so silly that she thinks that Black people are not as good as white people." Well, Negroes, I think. I was a Negro in 1963. The Negroes are not as, that's so silly. And we prayed for her.
Wow.
And my father, 1963, went to the Air Force Base commander and demanded reparations before that was a word. Like, you're going to apologize? That little girl going to apologize to my little girl, and that man is going to apologize to me. And they did.
Really?
Yeah. So the stories set us. So I'm on the bridge because it's silly to think that white people are better than Black people. And we can demand reparations and change and transform. Dr. King got killed when I was 8, 9, and I was like, this is my job. I didn't know exactly how, but I knew that I was going to pick up his work. So that's I'm on the bridge.
Wow. Oh, thank you for picking up the work, and thank you for sharing that. Also, is it okay if I name? I think your father just passed, didn't he?
He did. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
He died in.
Holding you in prayer.
Oh, thank you, man. He died in August.
Yeah.
Of ALS, an Air Force disease, I've learned.
Really?
Yeah. We'll talk about more of that another podcast, another time.
Okay.
So my people, all I don't think we could say that every Black family puts their kid on the bridge in the same way. That we can't. I don't know what that is.
Sure.
But how did your family? You got on the bridge, and you got on the bridge after this evangelical moment, and you got on the bridge with a parent at least being like, "Oh hell no, that's not what we're doing." Mm-hmm. Who's your chosen family that keeps you on the bridge, or how do you keep yourself moving in this work with your family and your friends?
So I do want to say that one of the things I've been reflecting on a lot is how actually even the post-evangelical, that as many problems as the church world I grew up in had, and I don't need to list them, we know them.
Yes.
They taught me God is love. And so even though I'm like post that world,
Yeah.
The roots of it of what I do now came from that. Even if that's not what the intent, and from watching my mother is an amazing human being. We're very different politically. We're very different theologically. She's 81, but she was a fierce, always advocated for the underdog and didn't care who she annoyed or made angry as she did. And I have a vivid memory, ironically, I just put it on Instagram today, of her busting into my 4th grade school because they had put me in gifted and talented, which she thought was that resources for gifted and talented was absurd and wrong, that resources should go to kids who were struggling in school, not kids who were thriving in school.
Ooh.
And then when she found out they were going to let the movie The Hobbit be shown just to the kids at GT, this was 1977, she lost her mind, went to the school and said, "Oh no, you are not using my tax dollars to let a select group of students watch this movie." And this was in Denver, Colorado, where we were having desegregated busing, integrated schools. And so my mother, and she won. All the kids got to watch the movie. All my white friends shunned me because they were mad that she had done this. We wanted this special treat. Everybody got to watch the movie. And I realize now, despite how different our politics are, our theologies, I learned some of I grew moral muscle watching her flex hers.
Mm-hmm. Go, mama, go.
So even though, so that's part of how I ended up on the bridge, actually, despite the differences now. The people that keep me on the bridge now, my chosen family, some are in my bio family. I have siblings who have also journeyed in different ways around sexuality and race and justice and the public good, who are doing social work and advocacy in all kinds of ways. A couple of siblings especially that I'm very close to. I'm the oldest of 7. So I raised all my sibs. And then I have family some are chosen family who are deep friendships I've been walking with since Union, right? Who are themselves activists and writers and theologians. And then other family who I would say have emerged as, and this is, I guess, what I would want other folks to hear who are on a journey, around, how, confronting death-dealing systems and maybe feeling alone, is that the more I deepened into local activist spaces where real people, not just fighting on social media, that's like the worst of it. Real people were saying, how do we change our school building? How do we change the city of Des Moines, where I mostly live, for racial justice? Those people became and have become sort of chosen family because they're networks that always hold me accountable and pour life into me. And you can't pick them from the abstract. They grow as you walk. And so those folks are the folks who, like, there was a time when Raising White Kids was coming out that there was a poorly done flyer that I didn't design that got sent out and scared some folks. And I ended up on the local news channel before the book was out because people were worried I was part of the KKK because I'd written this book called Raising White Kids.
Oh my goodness.
Oh man, Dr. Jacqui, before I even knew it had happened, Black people in my community saw this happening on Facebook and alerted me and started putting out the word.
Wow.
But like, nope, this is not who this is. We know who this person is. This is who she is. We're going to tell. And I was both deeply supported and loved by and cared for publicly by them. And that happened because we had been walking together.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
And so local connections that we sometimes in the social media world don't think it's possible. When we only see some of what's out there, we're like, we can never be in relationship. Well, actually, people are doing that locally all over.
Absolutely, they are.
Absolutely, we need to shout that story too.
We need to shout that.
It comes from faithful walking. Like when the school board is doing X, do I show up?
Right.
And do I amplify the voices of people of color in my neighborhood when they are saying to the school board, our children deserve deeply resourced, equal education, let alone the stuff that's happening now, right?
Yeah.
And it changes who our family and our beloved community becomes on the ground when we do that. And
it totally does.
More white folks need to experience that, which means we, those of us who are white, need to be modeling it and taking the risk to step into it because it changes your life.
It totally does.
That's my chosen network of beloveds.
I love that. I love that so much. Yeah, I think, the place that accompanies me on this journey is Middle Church. I can't tell you how much. I mean, I am who I am because we are who we are. I mean, this community, I've been here 20 years now, is like the church of my dreams. I started a new church development in Trenton that was a multi-ethnic church.
Okay.
I felt like that's my calling. But this is like I've inherited from Gordon Jott, my predecessor, a white and black church. You know, it wasn't half and half, but it was like pretty mixed. 400 people by the time I got there, and it blows my mind how people come. They just come. They come. Chinese people come. Japanese people come. You know, Hispanic people come. Puerto Rican, Dominican people come. Black people, Black diaspora people come. White people come. And I talk about race, like my friend Natalie Renee Perkins, my colleague. You know, we're all almost always preaching one sermon, and it just gets different titles.
Yeah.
Right? So my one sermon is God is love, and we are the world. So we better love each other.
Yeah.
Love God, love neighbor, love self, love period. Love period. Everything else is commentary. And that just, the consistent drumbeat of welcome because you're loved for queer people, trans people, Black people. You know, it is really a magical community of revolutionary love that is a laboratory, right, in which to play. And I think to myself, the white people who come to let the Black lady with the dreadlocks talk about race almost every Sunday, that's a good bunch of people. And the Black people who are in a church, Black people who are in a church with white people, when Black lives don't matter yet. That's also,
that's a kind of faith.
That's a moral courage. That's a moral muscle.
Moral courage, yes.
Right? And the Latinx people, the Hispanic people, and the Asian people who are there, like, okay, neither of these are, you know, one of these things just doesn't belong. That's not often enough of the conversation, are there courageously also changing us. Lunar New Year and Asian History Month and, you know, and Hispanic Heritage Month and work on those issues and subjects and cultures, not just in those months, changes us. We're changed because we're together. So all the people listening to this, you want to make an anti-racist world, you also have to have some relationships across ethnicity. You cannot. Do you know Rob Stevens? Rob Stevens is in the Poor People Campaign. White, thin, beautiful soul. A bunch of white people together. That's not a good idea. So that's not doing the work. So
Jacqui, I have a question. One of the things I write about in my new book, and I'm a little nervous about it because it's hard to talk about shame publicly and vulnerably, but I think because it feels good, that means we need to do it.
Yeah.
So I did. Right. And I know that shame can really shut down the possibility of meaningful interracial, multiracial relationships and community. And I'm wondering if you work with that at Middle in your community there, that beautiful community you've just described.
That's it. That's just an excellent question. I think we have come through some kind of a journey on that. When Mike Brown got killed, when Trayvon Martin got killed, and we really started, Trayvon really pushed us into we always have been multi-ethnic, but we really decided that we were going to put anti-racism in all of our mission vision statements.
Yeah, that's not the same as multi-ethnic.
It's not the same as multi-ethnic. You know, you can take your race all up in the multi-ethnic place and have a nice day. And people would say, you know, to my board chair, why is Jacqui always talking about race? And one answer would be because she's Black. And I would say, no, that's not why I'm always talking about race. I'm always talking about race because race matters all the time in a racist nation. So we went through kind of like a identity prickly, you know? And I have the feeling that identity prickliness was about shame.
Okay.
And one of the things that we did was to teach a lot of classes, to set a lot of tables, to open a lot of doors small groups, big groups, one-on-ones in every board meeting, really to create a shared language, Jen, you who are a professor, to create a shared lexicon, to create a shared understanding. And like also to celebrate that we're here. So you who are here are brave. You who are here are trying. You who are here are in the laboratory where we're going to make mistakes and say the wrong words around gender, around race, around sexuality. And that, I think, has taken root, that there is a, though not an academy, a kind of learning laboratory space where we know what we're doing is mission critical and we're also going to screw it up. I think that that has been helpful around shame.
Thanks.
But I would really love for you to take a moment or two to talk about what you think matters in white communities about managing shame.
You know, I'm not yet sure, other than I know we need to start talking about it, because I know it's there, and I know there's this deep-seated fear that it's not just that I'm part of bad things, which is guilt, right? But things I'm part of that I've done bad, I can repair, I can take accountability. But shame is this idea that maybe I just am bad. And it's there's an activist, Richie Reseda, who talks about shame as a neurotoxin. And I know shame is part of the racialization process for white youth. This risk that you're not good enough, and thus your family might kick you out if you don't comply with white racialization. And the author Tandeka years ago talked about this.
That Becoming White. That's such a great book. Yeah.
It is. And I think what I at least know is we've got to at least just start talking about it, because I'm not sure what we do with it, but I know that we can do nothing with it if we don't acknowledge it's there. And in the talking about it, start to publicly say we are not going to weaponize shame against one another. Because that is happening in lots of white anti-racist spaces, unfortunately. And so we've got to just start talking about it. And those of us that are a little further along in the walk have been doing it longer. When folks start to have a shame response, we need to pour love in. I think of the sort you were just describing when you talked about those roundtable conversations. Reflect back and say, actually, you are beloved. Actually, transformation is possible. Actually, you didn't design this system, and you get to choose. You get to choose how you want to be in relationship with the system. Because we can all grow into a sense of agency around our ability to become something different than what the system wants us to be. And so I think it's somewhere in there, though. I think it's I just find myself wanting to talk about it more with folks, because I think we just need to talk about it more. So I
love that. I'd love to talk with you more about that. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you. And thank you for your work. And how you describe your church, besides what it is for you all, to me, when I hear it, I'm like, oh, and also now we all know that kind of way of being together is possible. You just it's an image of the possibility, and we need more of those. So thank you.
You're going to be in New York at the end of June. I'm still trying to figure out how to get you to come by me while you're around.
Let's work it out. And I'll be there. Okay.
I love it.
I'll be there.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jacqui.
Bye-bye.
Bye.